search is underway for a 3-year-old British girl who's gone missing in the Algarve area of Portugal.
On a warm evening in May 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann was tucked into bed in a cozy apartment in a small Portuguese resort. Her parents, just a short distance away, checked on her regularly as they dined with friends. But when her mother, Kate, returned at 10 p.m., Madeleine was gone. The window was open, the shutters raised, no sign of forced entry. In an instant, a family vacation turned into a nightmare, sparking an international search. 17 years later, shocking new evidence may reveal what really happened that night. Before we dive into the recent discovery, we need to go back to the beginning, the origin of the story that gripped the world for over a decade. It all started in the small, sunny village of Praia da Luz in Portugal. That's where the McCann family found themselves in the spring of 2007. Kate and Jerry McCann, both doctors, had taken their 3 children, Madeleine, almost 4 years old, and 2-year-old twins, for a break from their busy lives in the UK. The McCanns had rented an apartment at the Ocean Club Resort, which catered to many British holidaymakers. This particular area was known as Little Britain because of the high number of British families who owned homes or vacationed there. The McCanns' apartment, number 5A, was on the ground floor of a block of several similar units. They weren't alone on this holiday. 7 of their friends had joined them, along with their children. This group, later known in the media as the Tapas 7, often dined together in the resort's tapas restaurant. The night of May 3, 2007 was supposed to be no different. They had their usual dinner reservation at 8:30 p.m. at the tapas restaurant just a few meters from their apartment. The restaurant was close enough that the McCanns and their friends felt comfortable leaving their children in their apartments, checking on them every 20 to 30 minutes. They weren't alone in this practice. It was fairly common among the resort's guests. Now, let's paint a picture of the layout. The McCanns' apartment had a sliding glass patio door that opened into the living room. The patio doors were unlocked that evening so the parents could easily slip in and out to check on their children. The children's bedroom was near the front of the apartment, with a window that was kept closed and shuttered. Madeleine slept in a single bed next to the bedroom door, while her younger siblings, the twins, slept in cots nearby. This setup felt safe to the McCanns, especially since they were checking on the kids regularly. The evening began normally. Jerry was the first to check on the children around 9:05 p.m. Everything seemed fine, although he noticed the bedroom door was more open than he had left it. He assumed Madeleine or one of the twins had stirred, but he didn't think much of it. He closed the door slightly and returned to dinner. Shortly after, another member of the group, Jane Tanner, went to check on her own child. As she walked back to the restaurant, she noticed something strange. A man carrying a small child walking across the street near the McCanns' apartment. At the time, it didn't strike her as odd. It wasn't until much later that this sighting would become a major point of discussion in the investigation. The next check was supposed to be at 9:30 p.m., but a friend, Matthew Oldfield, offered to check on the McCanns' kids while he was checking on his own. He quickly peeked into their apartment and noticed that the children's bedroom door was open. But again, no noise or anything was alarming. He didn't look inside the room thoroughly, just enough to see the door was open and everything seemed quiet. This was a moment that haunted the investigation later because, had he looked a bit more closely, perhaps things would have played out differently. Then, at 10 p.m., Kate McCann went to do her own check. And that's when everything changed. As Kate entered the apartment through the patio doors, she felt something was wrong. The bedroom door was wide open. When she went to close it, it slammed shut as if a draft had pulled it closed. That's when she noticed. The window, which had been shuttered and closed, was wide open. Madeleine was gone. Her comfort blanket and toy, Cuddle Cat, were still on the bed, but there was no sign of her. Imagine the terror that must have gripped Kate in that moment. She frantically searched the apartment, hoping somehow that Madeleine had simply wandered off. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. Madeleine was gone. Kate ran back to the restaurant, shouting to the others that Madeleine had been taken. Panic set in as the group realized something unthinkable had happened. The resort staff immediately began a search. Guests, workers, everyone joined in, combing the area, calling Madeleine's name, hoping she had just wandered off into the night. But as the hours ticked by and there was still no sign of her, the situation became more desperate. The local police were called, and by the early hours of May 4th, the search had spread throughout Praia da Luz, with over 60 people involved. Yet Madeleine had vanished without a trace. Now let's talk about those first critical hours. In any missing child case, time is of the essence. But many things didn't go as smoothly as they should have. For starters, the Portuguese police, unfamiliar with such high-profile cases, treated the disappearance as if Madeleine had simply wandered off. The first officers from the local police, the Guarda Nacional Republicana (GNR), arrived at the resort around 11:10 p.m., over an hour after Kate McCann discovered that Madeleine was missing. They searched the immediate area but quickly realized they needed more help. At midnight, the GNR alerted the criminal police, Polícia Judiciária (PJ), stationed in a nearby town called Portimão. But according to Kate, it wasn't until after 1 a.m. that the PJ actually showed up. It wasn't just that the police were slow to act. The crime scene itself was not secured properly. You would think that after a child goes missing from an apartment, the first thing to do would be to lock down the area, right? But no, the McCann's apartment was left open, and by the time the police finally taped off Madeleine's bedroom doorway, around 20 people had already walked through it. This included family, friends, resort staff, and even concerned tourists. Any potential evidence? Well, a lot of it was likely contaminated or destroyed by that point. To make matters worse, the McCann's apartment, apartment 5A, was left empty for an entire month after Madeleine disappeared. And get this, it was even rented out to other tourists before it was properly sealed off again in August for forensic tests. By then, it was probably too late for any meaningful clues to be found inside. If you've ever seen a crime show, you know how crucial those first hours and days are. In this case, the delay in securing the apartment was a serious blow to the investigation. Meanwhile, the McCanns didn't sit around waiting. Jerry and Kate knew that in cases like this, keeping the story in the public eye was essential. So they made sure to keep Madeleine's face in the media, starting what became a massive international campaign. And it worked. Madeleine's face was plastered across TV screens, magazine covers, and front pages. The McCanns flew to Rome to meet with Pope Benedict XVI and visited other countries like Germany, Spain, and Morocco to raise awareness. They even released balloons in cities around the world to remind people that Madeleine was still missing. But not everyone was happy with the attention. The local Portuguese police weren't thrilled with the constant media presence and the PR consultants who flooded Praia da Luz to manage the McCanns' public image. The police believed all the press coverage was actually hurting the investigation. The more the case stayed in the headlines, the more people speculated, creating theories and rumors that didn't help the actual search for Madeleine. One of the earliest suspects, a man named Robert Murat, was identified just 12 days after Madeleine's disappearance. He lived with his mother close to the McCann's apartment, which made him a person of interest, especially after some members of the McCann's group claimed they had seen him near the apartment around the time Madeleine disappeared. Murat, a British-Portuguese man, had even worked as an interpreter for the police during the early investigation. His life was turned upside down. His house was searched, his cars were examined, and the pool at his home was drained. Despite all this, nothing connected him to Madeleine's disappearance, and his status as a suspect was officially dropped in July 2008. But Murat wasn't the only odd figure in this case. Over the days and weeks leading up to Madeleine's disappearance, multiple witnesses had reported seeing strange men near the McCann's apartment. Some described men knocking on doors asking for money for non-existent orphanages. Others saw suspicious characters hanging around the area, seemingly watching the apartments. One woman even reported seeing a man leaving the gate near the McCann's apartment just hours before Madeleine was reported missing, looking around as if to make sure he wasn't being watched. These sightings left many wondering if someone had been scoping out the area, planning the abduction for days. There had also been a rise in burglaries in the area around that time, with some break-ins occurring in the very same apartment complex where the McCanns were staying. Could Madeleine's abduction have been a burglary gone wrong? Maybe she had wandered out of the apartment and startled the burglar? Or was it something more planned and sinister? With so many people coming and going in the small village of Praia da Luz, it was hard to pin down any solid leads. Despite all the search efforts, media coverage, and public appeals, the mystery only deepened. Scotland Yard eventually launched Operation Grange in 2011, a fresh look at the case led by Detective Chief Inspector, DCI, Andy Redwood. Redwood's team was clear from the start. They were focusing on the theory that Madeleine's disappearance was a criminal act by a stranger, most likely a pre-planned abduction or a burglary that she might have interrupted. At the time, local crime statistics showed a fourfold increase in burglaries in the months leading up to May 2007. In fact, there had been 2 break-ins in the very same apartment block where the McCanns were staying, with the thieves getting in through the windows. This made the burglary theory seem possible. Had someone broken into the McCanns' apartment only to be startled when Madeleine woke up? Though Scotland Yard seriously considered this idea for a while, by 2017, just before the 10-year anniversary of her disappearance, Mark Rowley, Scotland Yard's assistant commissioner, appeared to push this theory aside. He said they had pretty much closed off that group of people and were now looking at a much smaller number of more significant inquiries. Redwood, however, believed early on that Madeleine's disappearance wasn't random. He mentioned in 2013 that the evidence pointed to a pre-planned abduction, something that required careful planning and reconnaissance. Several witnesses had reported seeing strange men lurking around apartment 5A in the days leading up to Madeleine's disappearance. One of the most notable reports was about manual workers, including 6 British cleaners, who were working near the Ocean Club and had been offering their services to British expats. Scotland Yard wanted to track them down, believing they might have vital information. In October 2013, a major breakthrough happened when Crime Watch, a popular UK TV show, aired a reconstruction of the night Madeleine vanished. This broadcast wasn't just aired in the UK, but also in the Netherlands and Germany, showing just how widespread the case had become. During the show, Scotland Yard released e-fit images of 2 men who were seen near the McCanns' apartment, and they also showed images connected to a sighting by the Smith family. The Smiths had reported seeing a man carrying a child toward the beach on the night Madeleine disappeared. The details from the Crime Watch episode caused a huge stir, and not long after, the Portuguese authorities decided to reopen their inquiry, citing new evidence. But theories continued to swirl. One idea that gained traction, although most found it unlikely, was that Madeleine, who was nearly 4 years old at the time, had left the apartment on her own. Maybe she woke up and decided to go find her parents. But this theory had a lot of holes. For one, according to her mom, Kate, Madeleine would have had to open the unlocked patio doors, close them behind her, then make her way through 2 gates to get to the street. That seemed like a lot for a 3-year-old to manage, especially in the dark. As part of the investigation, police also used mobile phone tracking to look into who had been near the Ocean Club that night. With cooperation from over 30 countries, they tracked several calls and texts exchanged by a 30-year-old former bus driver who worked at the Ocean Club and his associates. These men were questioned in June 2014, but they denied having anything to do with Madeleine's disappearance. And then there was Euclides Montero, a former Ocean Club employee who had been fired for theft. His phone had been active near the Ocean Club on the night Madeleine vanished. Montero, originally from Cape Verde, had since died in a 2009 tractor accident, but police wondered if he had been breaking into apartments to feed a drug habit. His widow revealed that Montero had once been questioned in connection with other burglaries involving the sexual assault of children, though DNA evidence had cleared him at the time. In 2014, Scotland Yard issued a new appeal related to a series of sexual assaults that had happened in nearby holiday homes between 2004 and 2006. In 4 of these cases, a man had entered British families' homes in the Algarve and assaulted 5 girls between the ages of 7 and 10 while they were sleeping. Witnesses described the man as having tanned skin, short, dark, unkempt hair, and speaking slowly in English but with a foreign accent. The Policia Judiciaria, PJ, believed that this man might have been Euclides Montero, but the connection remained uncertain. However, this wasn't the last time authorities would suspect someone new. Fast forward to June 2020, and a new name became the center of the investigation: Christian Bruckner. German prosecutors made a bold announcement claiming they had concrete evidence that Bruckner had killed Madeleine. This was a huge development. Bruckner was already in prison at the time, serving a sentence for the rape of a 72-year-old American woman in the Algarve, the very same region where Madeleine went missing. His name hadn't come up before, but now it was all anyone could talk about. But who is Christian Bruckner? He's a convicted sex offender and drug trafficker who had a history of violent crimes. In fact, Bruckner had lived in the Algarve back in 2007, around the time of Madeleine's disappearance. He was staying in a borrowed VW camper van not far from Praia de Luz, and his criminal record made him a person of interest in the investigation. The timeline seemed to fit, but there were still major gaps to fill. The Braunschweig court in Germany was responsible for handling his case, but things quickly got bogged down due to legal confusion over which court actually had the authority to press formal charges. The case against Bruckner wasn't just about his presence in the area. There were other suspicious details. For instance, a British woman who had been his girlfriend at the time reported that the night before Madeleine disappeared, Bruckner told her, "I have a job to do in Praia de Luz tomorrow. It's a horrible job, but it's something I have to do and it will change my life. You won't be seeing me for a while." Then the day after Madeleine vanished, Bruckner's Jaguar was suddenly registered to a new owner. All these signs pointed to something far more sinister than just coincidence. By April 2022, the Portuguese authorities had made Bruckner an official arguido, a suspect in the case. This move meant they could eventually extradite him to Portugal for questioning. Meanwhile, German police ramped up their investigation. They even made a public appeal for information about Bruckner, including a phone number connected to a 30-minute call on the night of Madeleine's disappearance. They were desperately trying to tie up loose ends, but they still needed more pieces of the puzzle. In July 2020, the German police took another step forward. They began searching an allotment in Hanover in connection with the case, looking for any sign of evidence that could link Bruckner to Madeleine's disappearance. Though nothing conclusive was found, investigators were not giving up. By October 2021, Hans Christian Wolters, the lead prosecutor, stated that he was convinced Bruckner had abducted and murdered Madeleine. The search didn't stop there. In May 2023, British, Portuguese, and German police conducted a major search near the Arade Dam, about 31 miles from where Madeleine had gone missing. They were combing through an area just over a mile long, looking for anything that might connect Bruckner to the crime. This search was based on information that Bruckner's phone had been near Praia de Luz on the night Madeleine disappeared, within 5 minutes of the time she was last seen. The dam area had already been searched back in 2008 when a child's sock was found, but no other major leads emerged from that search. This time, the police were focused on finding anything that could finally close the case. Perhaps they believed Bruckner had dumped evidence, or even Madeleine's body in the dam. Bruckner's past certainly added to the suspicion. German investigators were now looking at the possibility that he had killed Madeleine and disposed of her body around the dam. They had enough evidence to keep digging, but still needed that one breakthrough to bring it all together. The case was starting to close in on Bruckner, but even after all these years, there were still no definitive answers. The public is still waiting for justice, and the McCann family continues to search for the truth. With Bruckner now in the hot seat and evidence slowly coming to light, Many are hoping that after all these years, the case might finally be solved. If you found this story as gripping as we did, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. We want to hear what you think. Also, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Thanks for watching.